Welcome everyone to our town. I'm Jill Lawrence, and today I have a brand new guest who's never been on the show before, and this is Paul Zinni, King Philip Superintendent of Schools. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here today.
It's great. It's great to have you. You are a new face in the community, basically.
Well, I think so, yes.
You may not
I just had my 3rd-month anniversary, so I'm veteran now.
You are.
Yes.
3 months already. No, I know you're not brand new, but you began on July 1st, I think, is that what you told me?
That's correct, yes.
And so newly hired full-time superintendent for the King Philip district. So we're happy to have you in the community.
Well, thank you. I hope people feel that way.
Yeah.
I've been really pleased to be here. People have been so welcoming and warm and friendly. And it's really a great district. People have a huge amount to be proud of.
Yeah.
And so we're going to begin to celebrate that.
Yes, I think so. We'll jump right in. I think that, you know, it's nice to have, someone coming who has a wealth of experience like you have in different districts in Massachusetts. Yes. You understand Massachusetts education. So that's great. So why don't you take a minute and tell us about your journey to KP and your experience in education.
Sure. Well, I'm an old person, so my journey started way back in the 80s, long before many of you were twinkles in your family's eyes. But I started actually as a teacher in Taunton. Okay. And I've actually worked in all grade spans from preschool through high school.
Have you really?
I've done it, yes. Yeah. A short stint as a high school math teacher, and I spent a little bit of time teaching reading, but primarily I spent most of my time teaching special education, either at the elementary level or at the middle school level.
Okay.
At a time when we actually specialized with the types of students that we worked with. And back then I worked with students who, even in that day and age, we were already diagnosing emotional issues and conduct disorders. Okay. So I ran a middle school classroom for students with those diagnoses for about 7 years.
Wow, that's quite a job.
It was.
And it was before kind of the revolution in special ed, right? That's
exactly
how it's done now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back then, students started out of the classroom when we tried to help them mainstream back into regular education. Today, we recognize that most of our students can really receive a quality education right in the regular classroom with their peers, and only occasionally do we have to pull them out for services.
Got it.
But I started with that and then transitioned into central office, where I took over for Taunton the Title I grant, which back then was a $2 million grant providing reading and mathematics supports in 10 of its elementary and middle schools.
Is Title I first grade? Or is that for any?
Title I is actually a federal program. It comes under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act.
Oh, okay.
And it actually was in response to the War on Poverty in 1965.
Oh, okay.
That talked about children who came from high pockets of poverty were more at risk of failure than any other population.
Okay.
And so the money basically was tied to the percentage of poverty in the community.
Okay.
The more poverty in the community, the more money you received.
Oh, okay.
So back in the 80s and early 90s, Title I was Taunton was receiving over $2 million. So you can see the kind of need that they had even back then. And so it was to provide a helping hand to those students who were struggling because of the issues associated with poverty.
Okay.
So we had programs in reading and mathematics at most of our elementary schools and a couple of our middle schools.
Right.
And so I oversaw that program as well as the early childhood program.
Okay.
So in 1995, when they needed to open a second early childhood center, since I was already responsible for the early childhood programs, they moved me out of central office and into a building.
Oh, wow.
And so I was the only central office administrator not in central office, but I was running a preschool kindergarten building.
Wow.
So for 6 years, I got to sit
Those
on the
are
floor with
little
the little ones and pretend to eat plastic food and all of those great things that happen with the early childhood population. And then in 2001, I found my way over to Avon.
Okay.
As the Director of People Services. And
okay. So Avon Public Schools.
Yes.
People, so basically, you're talking about human resources. Or, well, it was different than that.
So Avon is only 4 square miles, and so the town has only 2 schools. And so central office consisted of the superintendent and the director of people services.
Okay.
So I was basically your special education director, your curriculum coordinator. I was in charge of school nurses and guidance counselors, all testing, all professional development.
Oh my goodness.
Basically, you name it, and I got to do it.
Sounds like an assistant superintendent position.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when I transitioned to superintendent, I changed that title to assistant superintendent to reflect exactly what it was.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So I
That's
did,
a lot of hats, like all at once.
exactly, exactly.
But a small school.
Exactly.
Yeah, small district, I mean.
Right. So
Okay.
yeah, I spent the last 17 years in Avon.
Oh, wow.
12 years in that role and 5 years as the superintendent.
Okay.
Yes. And
So so KP, just in the size of the school, is probably a big difference, right?
exactly.
Okay.
I feel a little bit like the three bears, this one's too small, too big, and this one's just right. So I started in the big,
Right,
went to the
Taunton's
really
huge,
small, and now
right.
I've come to what I hope is just right.
That's right. That's so funny. So you are Goldilocks.
More gray than gold, but
All right. Well, good to know. That's right. All right. So yes, right. Taunton is a big. Now Taunton is in the Hockomock League. So I always think it's interesting when the schools that, I mean, now that I have a high schooler that we play in sports, some of them are so much bigger than we are.
oh yes.
Anyway, but so Taunton and then Avon and now here. So that's great. Good to know. And so at one point you were a high school math teacher and worked with middle school, so you are used to this. Yeah, like you said, you've done it all.
Regular ed elementary as well for
Yeah.
a short period of time, and special ed at the elementary level. So yeah, I've had the opportunity to be at all grades,
which is
at one time or
really
another.
cool because it does. They're so different. I mean, those developmental stages.
They are in so many ways, and yet
Yeah.
in so many ways they're the same.
Yeah.
Some of our behaviors of our little preschoolers and our high schoolers aren't all that different on a certain
I'm
day.
not surprised. In fact, some of the preschoolers. Someone just said the other day. I heard of somebody say, "Ask a kid something," because they always tell you, a little kid, because they always tell you the truth.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
And they probably tend to be less followers at that age than they do when they get older. Because I'm thinking middle school stage, which is where I'm at. Not personally,
I
but
love the stage. It was a great time. That's when students are really discovering who they are.
right.
And so there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
But they make their way through. As long as we're there to help support, and
Right.
and the families here in the Kingfield communities are clearly there supporting their youth. Then we as a school system are trying to do the same. And I think together as that community, we help raise these wonderful
think
men and women.
We have a great community, for sure. When I first met you, I want to jump into your educational, vision and some of the
Sure.
deeper stuff. But when I first met you this summer at like just a meet and greet for parents, you said that an interesting thing about Massachusetts. When you put the state of Massachusetts on the international map, is that something you can talk about?
I would love to talk about that. It's actually one of my soapboxes that I really love to stand on, and it's something that I think every one of us in the King Philip communities should be very proud of and should be talking about all the time. You, in fact, are seeing your students receive a world-class education. And why do I say that? Because if we look at the measures of quality education across the country and across the world, we really do reflect some of the highest quality education out there. So Massachusetts participates in an assessment called the NAEP, or the National Assessment of Education Progress. It's given every 2 years. They consider it the nation's report card.
Okay, so NAEP, N-A-E-P.
Yes, exactly. And the NAEP measures students in grades 4 and 8, and sometimes in high school as well, and it looks at ELA, English Language Arts, and mathematics. And we've been participating in this for over 2 decades.
So we submit our MCAS scores to that?
No, actually, it's a separate assessment
okay.
that the whole nation takes.
Oh, all
yes.
right.
And it's actually selected groups from each state continue to take it. So your school could randomly be told this year that
we don't take
your
it,
8th graders are taking it. Other years you're not taking it. But they do a representative sample in each state. And they've been doing this assessment for over 20 years. And for the last decade, Massachusetts has consistently come out number 1 in the country.
Okay.
Outperforming every other state every time in both content areas, English Language Arts and
math.
mathematics, and at all grade levels.
Oh, wow. So number 1 for the last 10 years.
At least, yes.
Okay.
And actually, that information is available on the Department of Education's website. We're finally starting to celebrate that here in Massachusetts, that we're leading the nation. Finally, last year, the Department of Education started to put that banner out there as well. Additionally, the United States participates in international assessments in math and in reading and science. They use tests like the PISA and the TIMSS, which are all acronyms. Like the TIMSS is math and science, the S is. And
again,
then
are they randomized?
They randomized again, exactly. And again, that's the barometer that's used to measure how the United States is doing compared to the world.
Oh, right, when they come out with those rankings.
Exactly,
Right.
and you hear how the United States is slipping.
Right.
And in fact, as far as the rankings go, the United States has slipped further down. But what Massachusetts has done over the last few years is when they've given that assessment, they've paid the extra money to have Massachusetts disaggregated so that we could look at how Massachusetts would be considered if it were its own country.
Right.
So it's averaged into the United States, but it's also looked at separately. And when it's looked at separately, whether it's math or science, we're falling in the top 5 of the world.
Math and science.
Exactly.
Actually. Wow.
And we were #1 in literacy, one of those assessments, just last year, the year before. So you're looking at this and saying we're tops in literacy, tops in math, and tops in science in the world. And Massachusetts is also outperforming the country and has consistently done so for the last decade plus.
Right.
And then you look at our MCAS scores, which are a comparison of how our district is doing compared to the rest of the state.
Yeah, we can jump right into
And
that. That'd be
when
great.
we do that, KP is consistently outperforming the state. And significantly so, the state average. So we test in grades 7, 8, and 10. And when you look at our scores in 7, 8, and 10, in both ELA and mathematics, and in science, our scores are way ahead of the state average. Significantly above the state average in all content areas at all grade levels.
Yeah. Well,
so
that's great.
when you say we're outperforming the state, the state is outperforming the country, and the state is outperforming the world,
or competitive
within the top 5 internationally, then I do believe that King Philip students are receiving a world-class education. And I just don't think that we're saying that loud enough and clear enough for people to really realize just how fortunate they are that their students are going through school in these communities.
Right. Well, I think that it's easy to take it for granted. I recently had a friend move away to another state, kind of far away, come back. And that was eye-opening about the public schools where she moved to, and could not wait to get back to Massachusetts.
And I do want to do a shout out
and is in this district, but just it's shocking. I think we do, a lot of us who, I grew up in New England, so I don't really know. Although I did teach out west, like I said, but for a year, but I didn't. Yeah, it was just 1 year, so, and I wasn't a parent. Parents are much more critical, right?
We certainly are. As I'm the father of 2, yes.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate, I can say my kids are now finished college. Right. But I do want to also, do a shout out and say that this doesn't just start happening at middle school and high school. I'm very proud of our scores here, but I want to say that the foundation is certainly built by the 3 feeder communities. Plainville, Wrentham, and Norfolk are doing an exceptional job of educating their students at a younger grade, and then those students are transitioning into King Philip, and I think our staff is continuing to do excellent work with them so that they are graduating, and ready for a really solid career or experience in college. And they're getting into excellent colleges and doing really well on the SATs and on the advanced placement classes. Right.
Well, that's definitely something I want to ask you. So I just want to kind of follow up on the sort of where we fall. Obviously, we know, for what you said, Massachusetts is leading the country. So just taking KP on its own, and now a regional district has challenges that a one town, one district doesn't. And I'm sure that as you decided, as you were looking at the job, and, I'm sure that factors in. But I know that parents, so we're in this pocket of the suburbs. Parents look at a lot of the towns, whether they're right around us or maybe a couple towns over, and they're always ranked in the top 10 in Massachusetts or the top 25, 30. So, it's something that you could speak to how those rankings happen. And you mentioned to me off camera before we started that KP was just recently ranked 58th in the state.
Yes.
Out of...
Well, we know that there are well over 350 high schools in the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah,
and
so
the ranking,
over 350.
Exactly.
Okay, so KP, is this 2018 or 17? Do you know?
The rankings just came out this spring, so I'm going to say it was the 2017-18 school year. The most recent data they have.
We were 58th out of 350, so that's great. So
exactly, and they look at a variety of factors. They look at the number of students who are taking different coursework. They're looking at attendance rates. They're looking at dropout rates and graduation rates. They're looking at our test scores. They look at all of those things together and they blend them. They look at how well we fund our schools. And so that actually was an area that dropped a little bit.
Yeah, well, we've had some a couple of rough years with that. Yeah.
What was actually interesting in the study is we looked at it and they listed the student to staff ratio
Oh.
And we were one of the highest ratios. So we're looking at 1 to 19, where many of the other districts that fell ahead of us were like 1 to 14, 1 to 15. Now, that number, when you say 19, it sounds like that's a small number.
Right, for
but
a
that's
classroom,
actually,
yeah.
when you think, that also includes things like teacher assistants
Right.
and in some of our, for example, our special education classes that have
Which are
smaller
small,
numbers.
yeah.
We have class sizes that are running 30 to 35 students in them.
I know.
And, that's where we struggle.
Right.
And when we do look at our MCAS scores and we dissect them a little bit, we are seeing that some of our more at-risk groups of students are the ones who are struggling the most. That they are, they're not catching up the way our high-performing students are moving.
So, there's a bit of
there's
gap.
a gap there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now the schools that, let's say that, again, you hear of some of the towns that, well, again, not a regional school, so it's different, but the towns that are often ranked in the top 5 or 10 of these every year, I wonder what they're doing differently for that gap, or just doing differently overall. Why? I mean, they may just have more the budget control because there's only one town is different, and maybe there's just a different, they can hire more teachers or have a different ratio of students.
And all of those things are complicated, and there's no one simple answer. And as much as I feel the budget's important, and I know that has been an issue in this community for the last few years, it's not the only factor. There are lots of things that we look at. We look at how we provide our services to our students. And we're looking at that very carefully this year. We have a new director of student services who's come in. She has started the same day I did.
Okay.
And she's coming in from Fall River, Lisa Moy. And so we're looking at how we provide services to our special education population and students who have disabilities, students who are second language learners, and we do have some.
Yes.
So we're looking at all of those populations and the programming that we do for that, and taking a very close look at those areas. We look at curriculum and instruction, and that's very important as well. And so, as a matter of fact, our staff has been deeply involved in that kind of discussion over the last week or two.
Oh, good.
So some of your children had time off the last couple of weeks because of professional development.
Yeah.
Well, that was time well spent for us, at least. That's
good.
when our staffs were sitting down and they were pouring through those MCAS scores, and they were looking for common errors in the scores. Look, a significant number of students got number 7 wrong. What kind of question is that?
You pour through
we
it
do
that
item by item
closely.
analysis.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely, by subject area.
Wow.
And so they'll look at that and they say, okay, that was a question around algebra and that particular formula. So let's go back. When is that taught? Well, according to the Mass curriculum frameworks, it should be taught here. How are we doing that?
Nice.
What are our materials? How are we introducing that?
Yeah.
And so we look very deeply at those things to try to make sure that, we're aligned to what's going on in the state. Because remember, MCAS is an assessment of the curriculum frameworks.
Right.
So it's basically measuring how well we're teaching the state curriculum. That's why we can have that uniform ranking, or we can look from one community to another.
Well, that was going to be my next question, was that, do you think because, people feel differently about standardized testing, but do you feel that the MCAS is an accurate reflection of what our kids are learning? I mean, I guess you answered it in that the curriculum frameworks, but what adds
Sure.
add anything else?
So I would love to see it not given every single year. I think we can get some good results by giving it maybe every other year or giving it once at each grade span. I think we do spend a lot of time assessing students, and I also think it's one measure.
Right.
I mean, if we have a serious medical condition and that we're trying to determine the treatment, we don't go with just one assessment. We get multiple opinions. There's more than one test done. We look at a variety of different things. And so we in education do the same thing. We're looking at a lot of different factors when we look to see how successful we are with our students. Everything from attendance, rates for kids, from discipline factors. And then when we get into the classroom, we're looking at teacher assessments, chapter tests, classroom, finals, final exams. So there are all kinds of assessments that we use on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Teachers are pros at just checking at the end of a lesson to see if students got it or didn't.
No, they are. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I feel very confident in the teachers. I just wonder. It just seems that the MCAS is, how much of that how much stake do we put in those scores, and as that relates to us and compared to other schools, and is it accurate?
Well, I will say this. They have looked at state assessments and compared them to that national assessment that I made reference to earlier, the NAEP.
Yeah.
Some state assessments are way off the mark. So, for example, some of your states down south, a student in 4th or 5th grade may be considered proficient on this standard, and yet when you look at the state, how that state performed on the NAEP, they're not proficient at all.
Right. So does that speak to the curriculum of that state?
Exactly.
Framework? Okay.
Where in Massachusetts, our state assessment is pretty highly aligned with that national assessment. We're seeing about the same percentage of kids around, those proficient levels and above. So there's no perfect measure.
Right.
And, it's one, as I said, one tool that we use to see how students are doing, but it does give us some good information about how, teaching and learning, and so we pay attention to that.
And you need something.
Exactly.
I mean, it's, if I think that as much as people, it's so much on the MCAS, but you really do need a tool to see if the curriculum is working, coming through. So before we run out of time, I want to ask you about your vision for KP as you're new to the job, and you just got your feet wet. You've had a couple months to get to know things, get to know your way around the towns. What is your vision, I guess, generally? I mean, I'm sure you have specifics as well. And I'm going to ask you a two-part question about what you think are the strengths and the weaknesses. You came from a small school. Before that, you were Taunton, which is huge. But I think also demographically, KP is different. And what we like to think, I say we, I don't necessarily mean me, but as parents, I think we like to align ourselves with, well, are we doing as well as the towns like Medfield and Wellesley and the towns that are, that we think of as, wow, those are really high-performing school districts. So I just wanted to speak to the strengths and weaknesses and your vision.
It's a lot to do.
I know.
Absolutely.
And you got 5 minutes.
But I'm very proud of it. Yes, I think I can do that and a whole lot more. So one of the things that was very clear to me when I arrived at King Philip is that you have a very strong academic program here. Our students are doing very, very, very well. When we compare ourselves to other communities, we're right up there with them. Those rank orderings, whether we're 58 or 54, we're right there in the thick of things.
Okay.
And when you look at all of the other opportunities that our students have, whether it's extracurricular activities, it's sports, it's music, it's drama, it's the arts, oh my gosh.
The band. That's not even counting
exactly.
marching band.
I had the privilege of being at the marching band competition on Saturday night. Just phenomenal, the things that our students have. And so I would say, with all honesty, our students are getting a private school education at a public school price.
Well,
and there's no doubt about that.
Well-rounded. There's a lot of I feel like that would be a strength as well. Just seeing from what I see, we're well-rounded as a school district.
I can't imagine a parent who wouldn't want their child to be attending King Philip when they really knew the whole story. Now, as far as my vision goes and things that I see us working on, I want to make sure that every single student walks out with the highest quality education they can possibly get. I want to make sure that we're not leaving any of our children behind in the process. Because we have such a large group of kids who are performing so very well, that average performance is so high, we can lose sight of some of the students who are still struggling. And so I want to make sure that we shine that spotlight on all of our students to make sure that everyone is successful and walks out with the skills they need to be very happy, content, and well-adjusted adults.
Right.
So that's all very, very important to me. Personally, I think we have to do a much better job of telling the story. Because I'm telling it to you now, but I think there are many people out there that will talk about kids of today or our school district in ways that are not flattering and are not accurate.
Right.
But the media portrays the youth of today in a negative way sometimes, and they portray issues that go on in schools in such a way that isn't flattering. And in fact, we have a tremendous amount to be proud of. And so I am working to try to make sure that we get the good news stories out, so people can be proud of that.
Right, and they can pass along the positive.
Exactly. We want to be fair. If there's something that's not going well, if we have an issue that has to be out to the community, we're going to tell that story too.
Yes,
because we want to be transparent, and people won't trust us if we try to hide, things that aren't going well.
Yes.
But we need to, as I said, though, really showcase all of the great things that are going on. And so we have started a news blog.
Yes. So tell us, and we'll put that on the screen. But it's you've started that
exactly on our pages of our website. You can there's a little link in one of the circles that you can click on news blog, and it takes you right to the blog. And there we're putting media-ready stories.
Okay.
So they're the kinds of stories that we think the newspapers and television stations should pick up.
Okay.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But we're putting those kinds of stories out there, and we will continue to push out other information there as well. But we have other mechanisms like our Connect Ed messages, our emails that go home that give you the day-to-day information.
Right.
Right. So this is for the bigger
The
stories.
news blog.
Right.
Okay, got it.
It's also linked to our Facebook page, which sadly was not really active for quite a while.
Yeah.
If you'd gone on it or were linked to it or liked it,
don't
you
think
didn't
I've
really
ever
see
been
much
on
on
it.
it for a while. But now the stories that are on the news blog will automatically get pushed to that site as well.
Okay.
And we've created a new Twitter account.
Twitter, I was just going to
the
say,
same way.
you need to have Twitter.
Yeah, so you could also connect with us at Twitter.
Okay.
And so it's at KP School Dist, D-I-S-T as in short for district.
Okay, district.
Is our
We'll put
Twitter.
that up too. So that,
And Facebook page is our still King Philip School District. And then we also have our news blog, which is kingphilipnews.org.
Okay,
And again, you can click right on our website and you can, you'll see that information, the news blog link right there.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Well, I'm glad we mentioned. That'll all come up, and we'll also put it at the end of the show.
Fantastic.
People, yeah. I'm trying to think. Oh, I know this is a good way to end. There's a little bit light. So you have a quote that's part of your email signature.
Okay.
And it caught my eye. I'm a quote girl.
Okay.
But I liked it a lot, and it's Nelson Mandela.
Yes. Yep.
And he was an educator, meaning maybe not by trade, but so do you want to say it or you want me to say it?
Please say it.
Okay. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world.
Yes.
It's the most powerful weapon. And I really like that because I think that applies to all ages. It applies to all ages. It applies to all the demographics. I think about people who are living in third world countries, girls who don't get to go to school, people that live in the urban U.S. who don't have the opportunity that, say, the KP kids have living here. It really does. It's a nice quote. So,
well, we all want to continue to be lifelong learners, and that's what we really strive for our students. The amount of knowledge that our students today have to learn is growing exponentially. It's impossible for them to memorize the kinds of information that we used to learn before.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is teach them how to be thinkers. We need them how to be critical thinkers, how to access information, how to continue to learn and grow as adults. And then they'll be set for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And that's what's important for us, making sure that our students leave us and are prepared for a life of a fulfilling life and happiness.
Right. I love it. So oh my gosh, you just said, it's like you read my mind. You segued into another quote. You ready?
I'm ready.
We're going to do another show of just quotes. So when I was trying to find the Nelson Mandela quote, I thought it was, at first I thought it was Gandhi because I was looking in my emails from you. And so you just said this, exact what Gandhi, so you're the second coming of Gandhi. He said, live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever.
Forever, exactly.
Isn't that a good one?
That's a great quote as well. Yes.
Yeah, you might have to throw that on.
I have a book of quotes that I just love, and I go through, and so the Nelson Mandela quote is what's up there now, but that will change in a little while, and I'll have a new one so that people will continue to look at them.
Yeah, it's good. I liked it. So great. Well, those are two great men to emulate. So thank you, Paul, for coming in. This is great. I mean, I feel
truly
like
been a pleasure.
I feel like we could do it again.
I was going to say, the time flew right by. There's so much more we could be talking about. Yes.
We'll do another one in the spring. How's that?
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic.
So you'll have a little bit more, just perspective about the position. So for NCTV, our town, Paul Zinni, King Philip Superintendent of Schools, we're happy to have him, and thanks for watching.